The day my husband died, his family cried louder than I did. At least that's what everyone believed. The church was filled with flowers, black suits, fake sympathy, and relatives I hadn't seen in years suddenly acting like they had always loved Michael deeply. I sat quietly in the front row holding my daughter's trembling hand while people walked past offering rehearsed condolences. "I'm so sorry for your loss. He was such a wonderful man. We're praying for you." But Michael's older brother, Victor, barely looked at me during the funeral. And his mother? She stared at me with cold eyes the entire service like I was some stranger who didn't belong there. I should have understood then that they were already planning something. Michael and I had been married for 13 years. 13 years of building a life together from almost nothing. When we first met, he worked long overnight shifts driving delivery trucks while I worked at a small pharmacy during the day. We struggled for years before finally buying our dream home in a quiet neighborhood outside Chicago. It wasn't a mansion. But it was ours. Every wall inside that house carried memories. The kitchen where Michael danced badly while cooking pancakes on Sunday mornings. The staircase where our daughter Emma slid down the rails after school. The backyard where we buried our first dog beneath the oak tree. That house was more than property. It was our entire life. And 3 days after Michael's funeral, his relatives arrived to take it from me. I still remember the sound of Victor pounding aggressively on the front door early that morning. When I opened it, he stood there beside his mother Patricia and 2 lawyers wearing expensive suits. My stomach tightened immediately. Something felt wrong. Victor didn't waste time pretending to care. "We need to discuss Michael's estate," he said coldly. Estate. I hated how quickly they turned my husband into paperwork. I invited them inside reluctantly while Emma remained upstairs in her bedroom still grieving her father. Patricia sat on my couch looking around the house with sharp judgmental eyes. Then one of the lawyers opened a folder. And suddenly my entire world changed. According to them, Michael had signed financial agreements years earlier involving family business debts I knew absolutely nothing about. Victor claimed Michael borrowed large amounts of money from family investments during difficult years and used the house as collateral protection. I stared at them in complete shock. "That doesn't make any sense," I whispered. Victor slid documents across the table toward me. "Everything is legal." My hands shook while reading pages filled with signatures, legal terminology, and numbers I barely understood. Then Patricia finally spoke. "You should have paid more attention to your husband's finances." The cruelty in her voice made my chest tighten painfully. I looked up at Victor desperately. Michael would never hide something this important from me. Victor leaned back calmly. "Well, he did." I wanted to scream. Instead, I called Michael's lawyer immediately. But the situation became worse. The debts were real. Or at least legally documented enough to create serious problems. Within weeks, everything started disappearing. The savings account became frozen. Michael's business shares transferred under review. The house entered legal dispute. Even his truck collection was claimed by family ownership agreements. I felt like sharks were circling my life piece by piece. And the terrifying part? They moved incredibly fast. Too fast. Like they had planned everything before Michael even died. Emma overheard me crying one night in the kitchen after another exhausting meeting with lawyers. She walked quietly beside me and hugged me tightly. "Are they taking our house too?" she whispered. I couldn't answer her. Because I honestly didn't know anymore. 2 months after the funeral, the court ruled temporarily in Victor's favor while investigations continued. That was the day Patricia finally stopped pretending. She arrived at the house smiling. Smiling. While movers carried furniture out of my living room. I watched strangers touch our family photos, Michael's books, Emma's piano, and the dining table where we celebrated birthdays for over a decade. Patricia walked slowly through the house like she already owned it. "This place should have stayed in the family," she said calmly. I stared at her in disbelief. "I am family." Her expression hardened instantly. No, she replied coldly. You were temporary. That sentence shattered something inside me. Temporary. After 13 years of marriage. After loving her son faithfully. After caring for Michael through surgeries, stress, financial hardship, and sleepless nights. Temporary. Emma started crying upstairs while movers packed her bedroom. And for the first time since Michael died, anger replaced grief inside me. Pure anger. We moved into a tiny apartment across town the following week. Emma hated it immediately. The walls were thin. The neighborhood was noisy. And every night she asked questions I couldn't answer. Why are they doing this to us? Did Dad know? Why didn't anyone stop them? I had no answers. But something deep inside me refused to believe Michael abandoned us like this. Because despite everything happening, one memory kept replaying in my mind repeatedly. 6 months before his death, Michael became obsessed with one particular property. A small piece of land outside the city near a lake. At the time, I thought it was random. The place looked old and almost worthless. Just a tiny cabin surrounded by trees. But Michael visited it constantly. Every weekend. Sometimes alone. Sometimes late at night. I even joked once that he loved that cabin more than our house. And I'll never forget his response. One day while standing beside the lake watching the sunset, Michael looked at me strangely serious and said, "If anything ever happens to me, remember this place." At the time, I laughed. Now those words haunted me. 3 weeks after losing the house, I drove back to the cabin alone. The property looked abandoned. Dust covered the windows. Leaves filled the porch. For a moment I just sat inside my car staring at it while memories flooded my mind. Michael standing near the water smiling peacefully. Michael fixing the old wooden dock himself. Michael refusing to sell the land even when Victor mocked him repeatedly for wasting money on it. Victor once called it a worthless swamp. And suddenly something clicked inside my head. Victor never cared about the cabin. None of them did. They wanted the house. The money. The business assets. But not this place. I unlocked the cabin door slowly and stepped inside. The smell of old wood and dust filled the air immediately. Everything looked untouched. Michael's fishing equipment remained near the fireplace. His old boots still sat beside the door. And then I noticed something strange. The floorboards beneath the dining table looked newer than the others. My heart started pounding. I knelt slowly beside the boards. Then I saw it. A tiny hidden metal latch. My hands trembled while pulling it open. Underneath the floorboards sat a locked fireproof box. For a second, I couldn't breathe. Michael. What did you hide? I searched the cabin desperately until finally finding a small key taped beneath one of the kitchen drawers. When the box finally opened, tears instantly filled my eyes. Inside were documents. Bank records. Property deeds. USB drives. And one sealed envelope with my name written across the front in Michael's handwriting. My entire body shook while opening it. Inside was a letter. Claire. If you're reading this, then something happened to me before I could protect you myself. I know my family. And I know Victor. If I'm gone, they will try taking everything from you and Emma. That's why I moved the real assets before anyone noticed. The cabin was never worthless. The land surrounding this lake is under private development negotiations worth millions. Victor never knew because I kept ownership hidden under the trust documents inside this box. Everything here belongs to you and Emma now. Not them. Never them. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you sooner. But I needed to make sure you were safe first. I love you both forever. Michael. I broke down crying right there on the cabin floor. Not from sadness. From relief. Michael didn't betray us. He protected us. The USB drives contained recordings. Recordings of Victor. Secret conversations discussing debts. Manipulation. Forged pressure tactics. Even discussions that strongly suggested Victor manipulated financial documents after Michael became sick. By the time I left the cabin that night, I wasn't grieving anymore. I was preparing for war. The next morning, I contacted a new lawyer. Not the family-connected attorney Victor originally recommended after the funeral. A completely independent investigator named Diane Harper. And after reviewing everything inside the fireproof box, Diane looked at me carefully and said, "Your husband knew exactly what they were planning." Over the next month, the truth slowly exploded. The development company connected to the lake property confirmed the land value had secretly increased dramatically due to upcoming luxury resort construction. Michael's ownership stake alone was worth several $1,000,000. More importantly, Victor knew nothing about it. And when Diane's team started examining the financial records deeper, disturbing inconsistencies appeared everywhere. Fake transfers. Manipulated signatures. Pressure tactics against Michael during his illness. Victor had been trying to gain control over Michael's assets for years. The recordings destroyed him completely. One recording captured Victor telling Patricia, "Once Michael's gone, she won't know how to fight us." That sentence became devastating evidence in court. Suddenly the people who treated me like helpless prey realized Michael left behind something dangerous. Proof. Patricia stopped smiling after that. Victor stopped answering media calls after investigators became involved. And eventually, criminal fraud investigations officially opened. I still remember the day Victor saw me entering the courthouse beside Diane. For the first time since Michael died, Victor looked afraid. The courtroom battle lasted months. But piece by piece, the truth finally surfaced publicly. Michael had discovered suspicious financial activity shortly before his death. He secretly moved critical assets into protected trusts connected to the cabin property. And he documented everything carefully because he knew his family would target me after he was gone. The judge eventually ruled in our favor completely. The house returned to us. The frozen accounts released. The fraudulent claims collapsed. And Victor? He faced financial fraud charges that destroyed both his reputation and business career permanently. Patricia never apologized. Not once. Even after everything became public. Some people would rather protect pride than admit cruelty. But honestly, I stopped caring about revenge by then. Because Michael already gave me something more important. Security. Protection. Proof that despite all the chaos, he never stopped loving us. The day Emma and I moved back into our house felt surreal. Sunlight filled the windows exactly the same way it used to during Sunday mornings with Michael. Emma ran upstairs smiling for the first time in months. And I stood quietly inside the kitchen remembering everything we survived. Then I noticed something taped beneath one of the cabinets. Another note. Another message from Michael. My hand shook while unfolding it. Real family protects you when you're vulnerable. Anyone else is just related by blood. I cried harder reading that note than I cried during his funeral. Because finally, I understood him completely. Michael knew his family better than anyone. And despite everything they became, he made sure Emma and I would survive without him. Years later, I still visit the cabin by the lake often. The luxury resort eventually transformed the entire area into one of the most expensive waterfront developments in the state. Ironically, the worthless swamp Victor mocked became the most valuable thing Michael ever owned. But for me, the cabin was never about money. It became proof of something far more important. Love. Real love doesn't just exist during easy moments. Real love prepares for the future. Real love protects people even after death. And sometimes, the people who try stealing everything overlook the one thing that matters most.